My name is Darius, and today I want to share with you a story that still chills me every time I think about it. It's the story of Elena Harper, a woman who trusted her husband with her life, literally, a woman who believed her marriage was built on love, devotion, and the kind of partnership people dream about. What she didn't know was that the man she slept beside every night, Dr. Stephen Thames, was quietly destroying her future from the inside. It all started on an afternoon that seemed entirely ordinary. Elena sat on an exam table in the pristine, cool office of Dr. Marcus Oakley, a respected OBGYN known for being thorough and calm. But that day, his calm facade cracked as he ran the ultrasound probe across her abdomen. His frown deepened. He angled the device, paused, zoomed in, then took a breath heavy enough to make Elena's stomach drop. Elena, he said quietly, who has been treating you before today? She answered without hesitation. My husband, Stephen Thames. He's a gynecologist too. Dr. Oakley didn't speak right away. He simply set his tools down, the metal clinking softly against the tray. When he finally met her eyes, something in his expression made her heart pound in her throat. I need you to go for some immediate lab work, he said. What I'm seeing shouldn't be there. The words hung in the room like a fog. Elena tried to steady her breathing. For months, she'd been pushing through pain-sharp spasms low in her abdomen, heavy bleeding that came without warning, exhaustion that clung to her like a second skin. Stephen always told her it was typical for a woman in her early 40s, that her hormones were shifting. It's just age, sweetheart, he'd say gently. Your body's adjusting. She wanted to believe him. After all, this was her husband, the man who celebrated her birthday with flowers every year, the man everyone said had hands gifted by God. But deep down, something never felt right. Stephen had left town for a week to visit his sick mother in Atlanta, and for the first time in months, Elena felt free to follow her intuition. That's why she'd come to this new medical center on the edge of town, because the pain had finally become too loud to ignore. When her lab work came back, a nurse entered the room with an uneasy look. Dr. Oakley followed moments later. Your inflammatory markers are extremely elevated, he explained. This isn't hormonal. It's something else. He pulled up the ultrasound image and pointed at a dark, irregular shape lodged deep within her uterus. This, he said, is a foreign object, and based on how embedded it is, it's been there for years. Elena blinked, confused. What kind of object? He exhaled sharply. It looks like an old-style intrauterine device, a type banned years ago due to cancer risks. Elena's world went silent. That's impossible. I've never had an IUD. I would know, and she would have. She'd always been terrified of them. Stephen knew that better than anyone. Doctor. Oakley looked at her chart again, then at her. There are no records of an IUD insertion, and something like this doesn't just appear. Someone put it there. Her hands went cold. Her vision tunneled. Her breath came too fast. The doctor continued. The tissue around it shows signs of chronic inflammation. You need surgery as soon as possible. I'm referring you to County General. You cannot delay this. He hesitated, then added carefully, Elena, once the device is removed, we're going to need to contact law enforcement. An implantation without consent, especially of a banned device, could qualify as felony assault. A crime? The word made her skin crawl. Who would do something like that? Who even had access to her body while she was unconscious? Elena walked out of the medical center feeling as though the asphalt under her feet had begun to crack. For 15 years, she had trusted Stephen with everything: her heart, her marriage, even her health. And now she was being told someone had violated her in a way too monstrous to comprehend. Surgery was scheduled the very next morning. The operating room at County General glowed under harsh white lights. Dr. Harmon, the surgeon, was skilled and steady, but even he paused when he finally pulled the object free. The IUD blackened from time, corroded. Its metal arms twisted into the uterine walls looked like something dug out of the earth. The damage it caused was far worse than Elena imagined. It wasn't just embedded, it had carved itself into her body like a parasite. This model was banned over a decade ago. Dr. Harmon muttered. It should never have been in any patient, let alone hidden like this. He placed it gently into a sterile container. Even through the fog of anesthesia wearing off, Elena could feel the weight of dread settling on her chest. Hours later, when she fully woke, Dr. Harmon sat beside her bed, the container in his hand. "We removed the device," he said softly. "But the surrounding tissue is severely affected. There are signs of precancerous changes. We caught it before it progressed, but not by much." He paused. "Elena, this wasn't an accident." Before she could process a single word, a woman in a charcoal suit entered, Detective Nina Blunt. She introduced herself, took out a recorder, and began asking Elena questions. "Did your husband ever perform surgery on you? Did he have access to your medical records? When was the last time you were under anesthesia?" And then it hit her. 8 years ago, her appendectomy. Stephen insisted she have it done at his private practice. He'd said it was safer, more controlled, that he wanted to take care of her himself. That was the only time. As Detective Blount wrote everything down, a cold truth began forming in the darkest corner of Elena's mind, a truth she didn't want to look at, but one she could no longer avoid. Someone had placed that IUD inside her. And the only person who could have, it was her own husband. The next morning, the sterile quiet of County General was broken only by the rhythmic beep of machines and the soft shuffle of nurses passing by. Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the woman she thought she was with the woman she had abruptly become, a victim of a crime she still couldn't fully comprehend. Detective Nina Blount returned to her bedside just as the sun began to wash the room in pale light. She carried a folder tucked beneath her arm and a seriousness that made Elena's pulse quicken. "We traced the serial number," the detective said without preamble. "The IUD model S3847 was officially logged as disposed of 8 years ago by the Women's Health Clinic where your husband is the managing physician." Elena felt a crushing weight settle on her chest. The words felt unreal, like dialogue from someone else's nightmare. "The disposal log," Nina continued, "bears Dr. Stephen Thames's signature." The room seemed to tilt. Stephen's handwriting, his confident, looping signature, the same one she'd watched him sign birthday cards, home loan documents, anniversary letters, the same hand that had touched her face at night, brushed her hair back from her forehead, held her hand in moments that now felt counterfeit. How could he? Elena whispered. But it was more to herself than to the detective. Nina sat down by her bed. "Mrs. Harper, I won't sugarcoat this. With the medical evidence, the pathology reports, and the disposal records, we have grounds to open an official criminal investigation." Elena nodded numbly. She knew this was the right thing. But she also knew what it meant: the life she'd built for 15 years, the home, the marriage, the intimacy was shattering in real time. Later that afternoon, Dr. Harmon returned with the pathology results. His face told the story before he even spoke. The tissue samples we removed, he inhaled, steady and professional, yet gentle. They show stage 3 dysplasia, precancerous, not cancer yet, but dangerously close. Elena closed her eyes. She felt as if the room folded inward on her. For months, she'd thought she was just tired, just stressed, just aging. In reality, her body had been fighting for its life. If you had waited another year, Dr. Harmon added quietly, maybe even less, the cancer would have already been there. We were lucky, lucky. It was such a cruel word, but he was right. When he left, Elena reached for her phone. She wanted to hear Stephen's voice. She wanted, despite everything, some explanation, something human, something that made this nightmare feel less intentional. But when she dialed his number, a woman answered, "Hello, who's this?" The tone was irritated, casual, too familiar for comfort. "Stephen's with a patient right now. Can I take a message?" Elena didn't respond. Her throat constricted. She hung up before a single word escaped. That was the moment something inside her finally broke. The next day, she was discharged from the hospital. Instead of going home, she drove straight to Stephen's clinic. Detective Blount had given her permission to retrieve any documents in his office connected to the investigation. And Elena was grateful because she knew Stephen would never willingly hand them over. The clinic felt different now, colder. The receptionist avoided eye contact. The security guard, Carl Benson, let her in reluctantly, glancing at his phone as though waiting for orders. Stephen's office looked exactly as she remembered it. The leather chair, the framed diplomas, their picture from Maui, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling beneath a sunset that now felt like a lie. She walked to the safe. Of course, she knew the code, their wedding date. It clicked open easily. Inside were dozens of files Stephen considered important: insurance documents, licensing forms, medical device logs. Her hands trembled as she flipped through them. March 15th, 8 years ago. There it was. IUDS 3847 disposed as defective. Signature Dr. Stephen Thames. She pressed her lips together to keep her body from shaking apart. This was no accident. Stephen hadn't simply made a terrible decision in a moment of pressure. He had planned it, hidden it, signed his name to it. The office door creaked. Elena turned sharply. Olivia Reed, one of the younger nurses, stood in the doorway. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair slightly disheveled, and in her hand was something she tried and failed to hide: a pregnancy test. Pregnancy. Elena. Olivia's voice cracked. "What are you doing here?" Stephen said. "You were still in the hospital?" "I was discharged this morning." Elena's eyes dropped to the test. "Is that what I think it is?" Olivia swallowed hard. She pressed the test against her chest like it was something fragile. On her hand, a small diamond ring glinted, simple, but unmistakably similar to the one Stephen had given Elena years ago. "Who gave you that ring?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Olivia hesitated, then whispered, My my boyfriend." The hallway suddenly filled with another voice, a warm, cheerful voice that didn't belong in a place like this. "Olivia, thank you again for helping me with the apartment paperwork." A pregnant woman called as she approached Marissa Vance, one of Stephen's longtime patients. She rubbed her round belly with a smile. "Dr. Thames is such a kind man. The kids are thrilled they're getting a little brother or sister." The world dimmed around Elena. Another child, another family. This wasn't just an affair. This was a life Stephen had been building in parallel, a life she knew nothing about. She turned back to Olivia. How many children does he have with you? Olivia's eyes filled with tears. 2, she whispered. Macy's 5, Isaac's 3. He told me you couldn't have children, that you were sick from birth. I didn't know he did this to you. The floor beneath Elena felt like it didn't exist anymore. Everything she had endured, the pain, the confusion, the shame was falling into place. While she suffered, Stephen had been giving parts of himself to another woman, to a younger woman, building a family he never wanted with her. And the worst part, he stole her chance to ever have one. Just then, the security guard's phone rang. He glanced at Elena, then at Olivia, then answered. His voice grew tight. Yes, she's in the office. Yes, Dr. Thames. I'll take care of it. Elena's time was up. She grabbed her phone and took rapid photos of every incriminating page in the file. Olivia stood frozen, torn between guilt and fear. He promised me he'd divorce you. Olivia whispered one last time. He said your marriage was already dead. Elena didn't answer. She walked past her, past the lies, past the ghost of the life she thought she had. She stepped into the sunlight outside the clinic, gripping her phone with trembling fingers. It was time to call Detective Blount, and it was time to destroy the man who had destroyed her. The moment Elena stepped into her house, a strange stillness greeted her, one that felt nothing like home. It felt like the silence left behind after a storm. Moments before the next one hits, she placed her bag on the kitchen counter, but her hands were trembling too hard to let go. The walls, the decor, the framed photos she once cherished now felt like props in a life she no longer recognized. She headed straight to Stephen's home office. His computer sat on the desk, pristine, organized, as if waiting for him to return and resume his double life. Elena had never needed to access it before, but today she typed his password on instinct his mother's birthday. It was almost insulting how predictable he was. The desktop loaded instantly. Folders neatly lined the screen case files, medical research, tax documents. But one folder stood out, labeled oddly, almost sentimentally, forever. Now. It was the kind of name someone used when hiding something they didn't want anyone to question. Elena hesitated only a moment before opening it. Her breath caught in her throat. The folder was filled with hundreds of photos, some taken on beaches, some in restaurants, some inside unfamiliar apartments. But the faces in the photos made her stomach twist. Olivia Reed, smiling shyly into the camera, her hair blowing in the wind as she sat beside Stephen. In another photo, she held a tiny toddler boy, Isaac, whose features mirrored Stephen's unmistakably. In the next, little Macy rode on Stephen's shoulders, laughing as if she didn't have a care in the world. Elena scrolled further. There were pictures of Stephen kissing Olivia's forehead, of them decorating a Christmas tree, of them lying on a blanket in a park like a happy family, photos of birthday parties, trips she had never heard about, gifts she had never seen. This wasn't an affair. This was a life, a second life, one he had nurtured while her own was slowly being poisoned. With shaky hands, she opened the subfolder labeled messages. A long list of dates appeared, 5 years worth of conversations. At first, they seemed professional, then personal, then intimate, and then horrifying. Stephen wrote, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I handled the problem with Elena during her appendectomy. She'll never get pregnant now. We can have our future without complications." Elena's eyes blurred. She reread the line again and again, each time feeling another part of her soul fracture. Handled the problem. like she was a burden, an obstacle to be removed. Scrolling further, she found more messages casual, almost joking between him and Olivia about how Elena's mood swings were getting worse, how the device must be irritating her tissues, and how he would keep her calm until everything fell into place. There was no remorse, no hesitation, just calculation. Then came the documents, financial transfers, monthly payments labeled support, an apartment lease in Olivia's name, insurance policies for Macy and Isaac, plans for future schooling, medical bills from pediatric visits. Stephen had been supporting an entire second household using money from the life he shared with Elena. One document, in particular, stole her breath, a draft of divorce plans he wrote to Olivia. Once Elena gets the diagnosis, I'll file. People will understand. It won't look like I abandoned a healthy wife, only a sick one. Public sympathy means we keep the assets. Elena felt sick. He hadn't just stolen her fertility, he'd been waiting for cancer to finish the job so he could leave cleanly. Her vision darkened. She had to hold the edge of the desk to keep from collapsing. Even then, even shaking with rage and betrayal, she remembered Detective Blount's warning, don't alter or delete anything. It could compromise evidence, so she copied every file to a flash drive. Emails, bank statements, photos, messages, proof of the man he truly was. He wasn't a loving husband. He wasn't a brilliant doctor. He wasn't even a father in any honorable sense. He was a predator with a medical license. Just as she finished copying the last folder, she heard the front door open. Elena Stevens' voice echoed through the hallway, warm and deceptively tender. I'm home early. I brought you something. Her pulse spiked. She didn't expect him back until tomorrow. Footsteps approached calm, confident, unaware his world was seconds from collapse. Elena didn't hide the screen. She didn't hide the flash drive. She didn't hide the container in her purse that held the blackened IUD that almost killed her. She wanted him to see. She wanted him to know the truth had finally found its way to light. Stephen walked into the office carrying a bouquet of red roses. His smile froze the instant he saw his computer open. The screen filled with his own incriminating messages. The bouquet slipped from his fingers, roses scattering across the floor like spilled blood. Elena, his voice thinned with panic. What are you doing? She turned the monitor toward him. Reading, she said calmly. Reading everything. His face drained of color. You shouldn't be going through my files. You have no idea what you're looking at. Oh, I understand perfectly, she replied, pulling the small container from her purse. Inside, the IUD sat like a rusted dagger. I found your little gift. His eyes widened. Real fear flickered for the first time. Elena, listen. I can explain. She stepped back as he lunged forward, reaching for the container. Give me that, he shouted, the mask cracking completely. You don't understand what you're doing. You could end my career. You ended my life, Elena whispered. Before he could respond, a firm voice cut through the tension like a blade. Dr. Stephen Thames, Detective Blount said as she entered the doorway. Badge lifted, 2 officers behind her. You are under arrest for aggravated assault and attempted murder. Stephen spun toward her, outrage twisting his features. This is insane. She's mentally unstable. You can't. But then Olivia burst through the door behind the officers, tears streaming down her face, hands shaking as she clutched her phone. Stephen, stop, she cried. I told him everything. Stephen's last hope evaporated. The officers grabbed his wrist, the cuffs clicked into place, and Elena watched silent, unblinking as the man who had stolen her health, her future, and her trust was let out of the home they once shared. He didn't look back. For the first time in 8 years, She felt like she could breathe. The house fell quiet the second the patrol car pulled away, taking Stephen with it. For a moment, Elena just stood in the doorway, staring at the empty space where he had been, unsure what emotion should come next. Anger, relief, grief, none of them fit. All she felt was a hollow, trembling numbness, like her body was still bracing for a blow that had already landed. Detective Nina Blount remained in the living room, speaking gently but firmly. Elena, we'll need to schedule your full statement for tomorrow morning. A forensic team will be here shortly to collect the computer and any other evidence. Elena nodded, her voice barely a whisper. I have everything saved. His messages, the photos, the financial records. That's good, Nina said. But try not to touch anything else until our techs arrive. We need to preserve the integrity of the digital trail. The front door opened again, and Olivia stepped in hesitantly, clutching tissues in one hand. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks, her breath shallow and panicked. She looked a decade younger than her age, like a child who had wandered into the wrong story. Elena, Olivia said softly, I'm so sorry. Elena turned toward her slowly. Of all the emotions swirling inside her, resentment toward Olivia refused to take root. Olivia was young, inexperienced, manipulated, lied to, used in a way that mirrored Elena's own suffering, just with a different mask. You didn't do this, Elena said quietly. He did. Olivia shook her head, tears streaming. He told me you couldn't get pregnant. He told me you two had been distant for years, that you didn't love him anymore, that you had some genetic condition. I believed everything. I wanted a family. He made me think I was giving him something he couldn't have with you. Elena exhaled slow, pained but steady. He knew exactly what to say. Olivia let out a trembling breath. How do I explain this to my kids? How do I tell them their father is a criminal? That the man they call daddy hurt someone this way? Her voice cracked. I didn't know he made you sick. I swear. I didn't know. Elena's heart twisted. Even in her own devastation, she saw the pain of another woman caught in Stephen's web. You protect them, Elena said gently. You tell them the truth when they're old enough. You make sure they never grow up thinking what he did is love. Olivia nodded through tears. Detective Blount placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Let's go, Olivia. We'll take your statement at the station. You're a witness now. And in that moment, Olivia seemed to understand the weight of what she had become. Not Stephen's secret, not his accomplice, but the final voice that ended his illusion of innocence. When they left, the house fell into a deep, ringing silence. Elena stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by roses that Stephen had dropped earlier, petals scattered like remnants of a funeral. Slowly, deliberately, she bent down and picked up a few petals. They crumbled easily between her fingers. For years, these gestures, the flowers, the sweet notes, the anniversary dinners had been the glue holding together a life built on lies. She wasn't going to let them anchor her anymore. Elena walked to the bedroom. The moment she opened the closet, Stephen's scent hit her cologne, detergent, the faint smell of hospital antiseptic that always clung to him. Something inside her snapped. Piece by piece, she began removing his clothes from the hangers. The sport jackets, the pressed shirts, the Christmas sweater he'd worn proudly, the cufflinks she'd once gifted him. Every item felt like a betrayal masquerading as love. She piled them into boxes with a quiet, methodical finality. She removed framed photos from the dress-a-wedding pictures, holiday trips, smiling portraits, and placed them face down inside a bag. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply cleansed the space like someone exercising a spirit. Her phone buzzed. She almost didn't look, but the caller ID showed Dr. Marcus Oakley. Elena, he said when she answered, his voice gentle and steady. I heard what happened. How are you holding up? The concern in his tone made something warm break through the numbness. I'm managing, Elena said, though she wasn't entirely sure it was true. I want you to come in for a follow-up next week. Dr. Oakley continued, not just for medical reasons. After what you've been through, you shouldn't face the recovery alone. Elena swallowed hard. She had never realized how much she needed someone to say that. Thank you, she whispered. Really? After she hung up, she stepped onto the balcony. The city below looked the same as always, cars moving, people rushing, life going on, but she felt it like a completely different woman than the one who had woken up that morning. In the quiet, her mind replayed the last 8 years, every moment of pain dismissed, every time Stephen smiled at her with calculating tenderness, every lie cushioned in medical authority. She felt anger, not the explosive kind, the cold, clear kind that burns cleaner and lasts longer. She wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. She was reclaiming her life. The next morning, Elena walked into the county courthouse not as a victim, not as Stephen's wife, but as a woman determined to be heard. Reporters swarmed the steps outside, cameras flashing as they recognized her from the headlines plastered across local news. Local OBGYN accused of secretly sterilizing wife doctor, arrested for attempted murder of spouse clinic manager, exposed in shocking double life. Elena kept her gaze forward, shoulders squared. Detective Blount walked beside her, a steady presence guiding her past the chaos. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with whispers. Stephen sat at the defendant's table, pale, exhausted, unshaven, his polished image shattered. His lawyer leaned close, speaking rapidly in hushed tones, but Stephen seemed unable to hear anything. He stared blankly ahead, as if the life he had spent so many years manufacturing had suddenly dissolved in his hands. Elena took her seat in the front row and folded her hands in her lap. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Stephen looked at her, not with love, not with regret, but with fear, real, unfiltered fear. Because for the first time, he wasn't in control. She was. At that moment, the bailiff's voice echoed through the room. All rise for the Honorable Judge Ava Jenkins. And the fight for justice truly began. Judge Ava Jenkins took her seat, a composed woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She carried an air of authority that settled instantly over the packed courtroom. Conversations died out. The tension became almost tangible. The state of Georgia versus Dr. Stephen Nicholas Thames, she announced, her voice steady. We'll begin with opening statements. The prosecutor stood, a seasoned woman with a firm tone. She walked toward the jury with quiet confidence, pausing just long enough to let the weight of her words gather. Ladies and gentlemen, today you will hear the story of a woman whose body was violated in the most intimate, calculated way by the man she trusted above all others, a husband, a physician, a man who vowed both in marriage and in medicine to protect her. Elena watched as the juror's expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief to horror. The prosecutor continued. We will show that Dr. Stephen Thames secretly implanted a banned cancer-causing IUD inside his wife, Elena Harper, during surgery 8 years ago, without her consent, without her knowledge, and with full awareness of the harm it could cause. A ripple of outrage moved through the courtroom. This wasn't a mistake, she went on, pacing slowly. It was a decision, one made to eliminate Elena's ability to have children, so he could start a second, a hidden family with another woman, one he was already involved with. Stephen flinched. His lawyer touched his arm, urging him to remain still. The prosecutor concluded, by the end of this trial, there will be no doubt that the defendant acted with intent, cruelty, and a complete disregard for human life. Next, Stephen's attorney rose slick, controlled, voice polished like a salesman's. This case, he began, is not what the prosecution claims. It's a tragedy. Yes, but one born from miscommunication and medical complexity. Dr. Tamiz is a respected physician. Any actions he took were motivated by concern for his wife's health, not malice. Elena almost laughed. Concern, he had nearly killed her. He continued, we will show that Elena's recollection is emotional, unreliable, influenced by her recent diagnosis, and that my client did what he believed was medically necessary. A juror shifted uncomfortably. The lawyer's words hung in the air, but they felt flimsy like a defense built on sand. Then the witnesses began. Olivia Reed was called first. The courtroom door creaked open as Olivia walked in, visibly pregnant, her hands trembling slightly. Her eyes refused to meet Stephen's as she took the witness seat. Ms. Reed, the prosecutor said gently, can you describe your relationship with the defendant? Olivia swallowed hard. We were together for 5 years. Her voice cracked. He told me he and Elena were no longer intimate, that she had a condition that made pregnancy dangerous. I believed him. Did he tell you when he planned to leave his wife? Olivia nodded, tears filling her eyes. He said he was waiting for the right moment. He said she would get very sick soon, and that people would understand if he filed for divorce after. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Stephen shifted violently in his seat. His lawyer whispered urgently, but the damage was done. Did he ever mention sterilizing his wife? The prosecutor asked. Olivia hesitated, but finally nodded. He said he'd taken care of the problem during a surgery years ago. I didn't understand what he meant then, but now. She broke into quiet sobs. The prosecutor placed a box of tissues in front of her. Thank you, Miss Reed. When Olivia left the stand, she avoided looking at Stephen entirely. Next came Dr. Marcus Oakley. He testified calmly about the ultrasound findings, the foreign object, and the immediate alarm he felt upon realizing it was a banned device. Then Dr. Vernon Harmon, the surgeon who presented the blackened IUD container to the court. Even the jurors seemed to recoil at the sight. This device, he explained, has been prohibited for over a decade. It is linked to severe complications, including cancer. Its presence in Mrs. Harper's body was not only dangerous, it was life-threatening. Finally, the forensic analyst took the stand, confirming the authenticity of the messages recovered from Stephen's computer. Every damning word, every confession, every plan. But the moment everyone held their breath for was when Judge Jenkins called Mrs. Elena Harper. Please approach the stand. Elena stood slowly, the courtroom falling into a hush as she walked to the witness chair. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears, but her steps were steady. She took the oath, sat, and folded her hands together. The prosecutor approached gently. Elena, how long were you married to Dr. Thames? 15 years. And when did you begin experiencing symptoms? About 6 months ago. Pain, bleeding, fatigue. I thought it was menopause starting early. She paused. Stephen told me it was normal. Her voice wavered, just once. The prosecutor let her breathe before continuing. What did you feel when you learned there was a foreign device inside you? Elena closed her eyes, remembering that moment in Dr. Oakley's office, the shock, the terror, the betrayal. I felt violated, she whispered. I felt like my body had been used without my permission, like someone had stolen my future without me even realizing. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but her voice grew steadier. I wanted children. He told me I was too old, too unstable. He made me believe my body was broken, but it wasn't. He broke it. The room was silent. And when you found out he had a second family, the prosecutor asked softly. Elena exhaled shakily. It was like grieving a life that never existed. While I was suffering, while I was losing hope, he was celebrating birthdays, planning futures, loving a woman he actually wanted to give children to. Her voice hardened. He killed the part of me that trusted him, and he didn't care. She kept her eyes forward, but in her peripheral vision, she could see the jurors' faces horrified, sympathetic, angry. Then finally, she looked at Stephen. His eyes were red, his face pale. And in that moment, he wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a husband. He wasn't even a man with excuses left to hide behind. He was just small. The prosecutor nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Harper. No further questions. As Elena stepped down, the courtroom remained silent, not because they lacked words, but because they understood the gravity of what she had endured. And they understood something else, too. The verdict. When it came, Sasson, it would not just be justice. It would be the truth catching up to a man who thought he was untouchable. Hours passed as witness after witness dismantled the image of Dr. Stephen Thames piece by piece. By the time the defense attorney stood for cross-examination, the courtroom felt heavy, like everyone had been pushed to the edge of the same collective breath. Stephen's lawyer tried everything. He questioned the precision of medical records. He implied Elena's pain could have been caused by unrelated conditions. He even suggested that Olivia's testimony was emotionally compromised due to pregnancy hormones. At that, Judge Jenkins raised a single eyebrow, a subtle warning that she would not tolerate disrespect disguised as legal strategy. But nothing the defense said could erase the facts. The signatures, the messages, the IUD, the children, the motive. It was all carved into the record. Finally, after the last expert testified, Judge Jenkins called for a recess before closing remarks. Elena sat quietly, her hands clasped in her lap. Detective Blount leaned toward her. You're doing incredibly well, she said. This case is stronger than most survivors ever get. Survivor. Elena let the word settle into her chest. It didn't feel heavy. It felt true. When the court reconvened, the prosecutor delivered her closing argument with unwavering conviction. Dr. Stephen Thames abused his medical knowledge, his access, and his wife's trust to commit a crime that was not only intimate, it was calculated. His actions were not driven by medical necessity. They were driven by selfishness, deceit, and a desire to control. She paused, letting the silence work for her. He took away Mrs. Harper's ability to choose motherhood. He jeopardized her life. And while she suffered, he built another family in the shadows. Ladies and gentlemen, justice demands accountability. Then it was the defense attorney's turn. He spoke of Stephen's impeccable record, his years of service, his supposed devotion to both families. He argued that medical misjudgment did not equal criminal intent. But the argument was thin, flimsy, insultingly out of touch with the evidence. Finally, Judge Jenkins turned to the jury. You may now deliberate. The jurors filed out, leaving the courtroom submerged in a thick, suffocating quiet. Elena felt her pulse in her throat. Olivia sat a few benches behind her, hands pressed to her stomach as if trying to protect her unborn child from the tension. 10 minutes passed, then 20 and 35. Every second stretched like an elastic band ready to snap. Finally, the double doors opened. The jurors returned. Some looked angry, some looked sad, but none looked confused. Elena's breath hitched. The foreperson stood in the case of the state of Georgia versus Dr. Stephen Nicholas Thames. She began, voice steady. We, the jury, find the defendant. A beat of silence. Guilty. The courtroom erupted gasps, murmurs, even a soft sob from somewhere behind Elena. Stephen slumped back in his chair, his composure cracking for the first time since the trial began. His lawyer closed his eyes. Knowing the fight was over, Judge Jenkins lifted her gavel just slightly. Dr. Thames, please rise. Stephen stood slowly, like a man who had aged decades in 1 week. You have been found guilty of aggravated assault resulting in grievous bodily harm, medical battery, and attempted murder. Considering the severity, premeditation, and breach of professional ethics, this court sentences you to 7 years in a maximum security facility. She continued, her voice unwavering. Your medical license is permanently revoked. You are ordered to pay $500,000 in damages to Mrs. Harper, as well as full coverage of her ongoing medical expenses. Stephen blinked, stunned. 7 years, no career, public disgrace, a legacy destroyed. As officers approached to cuff him again, Stephen turned not to the judge, not to the jury, but to Elena. Elena, please, he said, voice hoarse. We can fix this. I was trying to protect us. You know me. You know I'm not a monster. She held his gaze without flinching. No, she said softly. I didn't know you at all. The officers led him away, past Olivia, who covered her mouth as tears spilled over, past reporters who scribbled frantically, past the prosecutor who didn't spare him a glance. When the doors closed behind him, a strange quiet settled, not empty, peaceful. Elena felt air fill her lungs fully for the first time in years. Detective Blount approached her slowly. It's over, she said. Elena nodded. No, she corrected gently. It's just beginning. 1 year later, Elena stood in front of a full-length mirror in a soft-lit room, her reflection almost unrecognizable compared to the woman who once limped into a clinic in pain and fear. She was thinner, stronger, her posture straight, her eyes brighter, her ivory dress draped gracefully over her frame, simple yet elegant. She looked like a woman reborn. Behind her, Dr. Marcus Oakley adjusted the delicate veil resting on her hair. You look incredible, he said softly. Not as a doctor, not as a colleague, but as a man who had walked beside her through every painful step of recovery. Elena smiled, something warm blooming in her chest. My lab work came back normal. Right, completely normal. Marcus said, no more inflammation, no more dysplasia. You're healthy. Elena, really healthy. The door clicked open, and a little girl in a white dress skipped in, holding a basket of rose petals. Aaliyah Carter, 5 years old, her bright eyes glowing with excitement. Mommy, are you ready? She chirped. Elena crouched down, embracing her. The small arms around her neck felt like the sweetest kind of miracle. 6 months earlier, She had signed the papers to adopt Aliyah, a child who had lost her parents in a car accident, a child who needed a home as desperately as Elena needed a chance at motherhood. "Do I look okay?" Elena asked playfully. Aliyah nodded with the serious authority only a 5-year-old could muster. "You look like a princess." Marcus extended his arm toward Elena. "It's time." She took it. Together, they walked toward the garden where friends, supporters, and a future free from fear were waiting. As they stepped into the warm sunlight, Elena looked back once, just once, at everything she had survived, and then she walked forward toward a life built on honesty, toward a love that healed instead of harm, toward the family she never thought she'd have. A year ago, she lost almost everything, but today, she had everything that mattered, and this time it was hers. The garden ceremony drifted gently into the evening, wrapped in soft amber light. Laughter mingled with the breeze. Children ran across the grass, and the delicate notes of a violin hummed in the background. It was peaceful, so peaceful that Elena found herself blinking, as if she needed to confirm this was real and not a dream meant to comfort a hurting mind. Aliyah had long since discarded her basket and was now twirling in circles, letting her rose petals spill freely across the lawn. Marcus watched her with the tender smile of a man who knew exactly what it meant to rebuild a life from the broken pieces of another person's pain. He wrapped an arm around Elena's waist, and she leaned into him, letting herself feel the warmth of a love that didn't hide in shadows or require her to shrink to fit inside it. As the night deepened, the guests gradually made their way out, leaving behind the faint scent of flowers and the echo of every well wish. When the last car pulled away, Elena and Marcus sat together under a string of soft white lights, watching Aliyah fall asleep in a hammock nearby. "You did it," Marcus said quietly. "You made it through something most people wouldn't survive." Elena stared at her hands, hands that had once trembled with fear, now anchored her to a world she had reclaimed. "Some days," she admitted, "I still feel the shadows of what happened. Not the pain exactly, but the memory of being powerless." "That's normal," Marcus assured her. "Healing isn't the absence of scars. It's learning to live with them and not let them control you." "I know," she said softly. "But sometimes I wonder how I didn't see it sooner. How I slept next to a man capable of something so cruel." Marcus shook his head. "That's not a failure. That's trust. And trust isn't a weakness. The fault will never be yours." A gentle calm settled over her chest, and for the first time she believed that. Later that night, after Aliyah was tucked into bed, Elena stood at the balcony of her new home, a modest but warm townhouse, filled with nothing but honesty and laughter. She gazed at the moonlit sky as the soft hum of crickets filled the silence around her. Her thoughts drifted back, uninvited but no longer destructive. She remembered the sterile smell of Stephen's clinic, the cold dread of Dr. Oakley's discovery, the betrayal inside that hidden folder on the computer, the courtroom, the gavel, his face when the verdict was read. All of it was still part of her story, but no longer the ending. For years, she had believed strength meant endurance, staying quiet, pushing through, trusting that things would get better if she just held on a little longer. But now she understood something far more powerful. Strength wasn't endurance. It was action. It was choosing herself when everything around her tried to convince her not to. A breeze brushed past her cheek as if affirming the thought. She closed her eyes and whispered silently, not to Stephen, not to the past, but to the part of her that had stayed alive, even in the darkest moments. "I'm still here." and I'm finally free. Moments later, she heard gentle footsteps behind her. Aaliyah appeared, rubbing her sleepy eyes, holding her small stuffed rabbit. Mommy, are you okay? Elena smiled and lifted her daughter into her arms. I'm perfect, sweetheart. Just thinking. Aaliyah touched her cheek. About the bad man, Elena hesitated, then nodded. About everything. But it's okay. We're safe now. The little girl rested her head on Elena's shoulder. Because you're brave. Elena blinked back the sudden sting of tears. She wasn't used to hearing that word tied to her. But now, maybe she deserved it. Yes, Elena said softly. Because we're brave. She carried Aliyah back to bed, tucked her under the blanket, and kissed her forehead. Then she returned to the balcony, letting the night wrap around her gently. After everything she had survived, she wanted to say something meaningful, something honest, something that could reach someone out there who might be living in silence the way she once did. Turning her gaze to the quiet horizon, she breathed in deeply and spoke to you, to the world, to anyone who needed to hear it. If there's one thing I learned, she whispered, it's that your intuition is never your enemy. It is your protector, your compass. Even when your mind is confused and your heart is trying to keep the peace, that quiet inner voice, listen to it. It's the truth trying to save you. She paused, letting the words settle in the cool night air. Stephen tried to take away my choices, my health, and my future, but he didn't take me. There's always something left to rebuild with. There's always a way forward. And sometimes, the life waiting for you is better than anything you ever imagined. A soft tear slid down her cheek, not from sorrow, but from gratitude. With every ending, she whispered, there really is a beginning. Behind her, the home glowed warmly. Inside it was the man who helped her heal, and the child who gave her a new kind of motherhood, a family created, not assigned. And for the first time in years, the weight on her chest felt light. As Elena walked back inside, closing the balcony door behind her, it felt symbolic, like she was sealing away the past, not to forget it, but to keep it where it belonged. Tomorrow would be a new day, a good one, a free one. And as every survivor eventually learns, freedom isn't something someone gives you, it's something you claim. If you've stayed with Elena through her journey, thank you. Stories like hers are a reminder that silence doesn't protect us. Truth does. And healing isn't a straight line, but it is always worth the fight. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I hope you're taking care of yourself. And if your intuition is whispering, please don't ignore it. This is revenge in silence. And sometimes the quietest voices carry the strongest power.